So, Gary, one of the things I wanted to discuss with you, you've recently suggested a new way of looking at seeding for racing, obviously in view of the recent situation in revolving 10 pin running at Newcastle being withdrawn from Newcastle. Lots and lots of suggestions for seeding changes, double rails, etc. You've come up with your own idea. Could you kind of run through how you see things?
Definitely. Well, as you say, double rails to middle, middle to rails, middle to wide, etc. These are all things that are open to interpretation. Whereas with the idea I've had is that, like, a racing manager is able to designate an ideal trap for a dog. So he simply puts whatever, if he was to handpick a trap for the dog, where he would put it. So 10 pin, for instance, he might decide, in his opinion, that it's an absolute railer. So 10 pin, instead of having just rails next to it, would have one next to it. He might look at, let's use the dog that was in that kind of situation that occurred recently, King Bruno, and he might say, yeah, that dog is a number 4. Trap 4 is his trap. It's where he wants to be out the boxes. It's where he wants to be on the approach to the corner. And that's where he's going to take the bend, which, I've watched these 10 pin and King Bruno run, and there's no way that anyone, I think, having watched them run, would have drawn them King Bruno inside 10 pin. So allowing a racing manager to allocate a dog an ideal trap, in theory, if he's conscientious, vigilant, and does the job, is the right man doing the job, there's no reason why dogs can't be at least allocated the correct seeding to start with. Having hopefully been given the correct seeding, my idea then was that the dogs are all fed into a computer with their correct seeding, and the computer is programmed, not the computer, the program is such that it will allocate, equally distributing the dogs in their ideal trap positions insofar as it can. And I don't see why it can't be done. I mean, I've been thinking about this a bit since I first came up with it, and it boils down to really the racing manager doing their job and not delegating to somebody who's not experienced enough. Anyway, so having done that, so having a racing manager supposedly doing his job properly, allocate the correct trap, the dog then would have to kind of run from that trap for 3 races. If it was glaringly obvious that the racing manager has made a mistake, at his discretion, he could change it before those 3 races. If a trainer is totally opposed in the view about where his dog's ideal trap has been allocated, he can lodge a review with the racing manager, and the racing manager is obliged to take a proper look at it and maybe consult with the trainer. But having done all that, the racing manager's decision will be final. And I think this will stop a lot of the tactical seeding, trainers phoning up, entering dogs, and racing managers not really taking the time to watch races or find out from where the racing manager, where the dog ran before, if that seeding that's been asked by the trainer is a bona fide request or tactical seeding. So I think you could, iron out a lot of it if you adopted something like I'm proposing.
So, presumably, then you're looking at say your typical, I don't know, trap 3 dog. He will be more likely to get trap 3 than trap 1, which at the moment he goes in. He calls himself a railer, even though he really wants probably trap 3.
Yeah.
So, and realistically, if we get a 10 pin or we get a Bocco's Doomy, bless him, that absolutely wants trap one, he'll be more likely to get trap one. Is that the basic essence of it?
Yeah, well, he won't have a three dog, a dog that really wants to be in three drawn inside him. It's impossible for it to occur. Even though the draw's random, it's distributed equally on, through the draw, and it will stop the temptation for the trainer of the dog who wants trap three, because he doesn't want to be in five. It might take away the temptation to call it a one. Well, he won't have the opportunity to call it a number.
I was going to say that it's the temptation that goes missing, isn't it? Because it's taken out of his hands, and effectively, if he ends up in five, well, that's tough. It probably ended up in five anyway. So.
Well, exactly. Look, you can't legislate for 5-6 railers going through into a final or into heats or semi-finals where there's preponderance. Now, I've also further thought about it, and I would think that probably the main categories dogs would fall into of ideal traps would be traps 1, trap 3, or trap 6. But it does give the opportunity for someone, a racing manager, to kind of think about it and maybe put a 2 on a dog, or a 4 or a 5 on a dog that, in his opinion, is more than likely to get away with that draw. So there's a lot of input required from the racing managers. It's not a straightforward thing. It's not going to be easy. Whether they'll dedicate the time to it is the thing I have a big doubt about. But with the way the sport's going with welfare and whatever, and quite rightly, there's no reason why it can't be done. Allocate a little bit of extra time. There's hardly any open racing there. I'm not saying this could apply in graded races. That's different completely. Forget about graded races. Racing managers will allocate the traps as they see fit and grade the races. I'm talking about open race competitions. I don't see why it can't be done. I just, and even when it comes to kind of the Derby draw being done live, you could still, even though it's generated by a computer, you could still have it done so the dogs' names came out individually and were placed in the heats individually, just as it occurs now, to keep that anticipation and excitement going when you see a live draw. So I don't see any kind of failings on that side of it.
To me, it strikes me that the real big beneficiaries are as I said, the kind of the 10 pins or the Bocco's Doomies, dogs that, if they are drawn, no matter where they're drawn, 3, 4 or whatever, they absolutely need trap 1, because if they were graded races, they would be given trap 1. The racing manager would go,
correct.
And we see some of them that they've had the last 25 races from trap 1, because the racing manager knows if he puts it in 2, the 1 is never going to get a run anyway. And so to me, that would seem to be the primary beneficiary. But of course, I think, as we've said in the past, the biggest issue of all is that if we had more wide runners, we probably wouldn't get into quite this difficulty as we have, because we are still going to end up with dogs running out of trap 5 that want sort of 2 or 3, aren't we?
Exactly, but a dog might not necessarily be penalised 5 times on the spin, which can happen, but under this system would be less likely to happen. And also, I think it's important that, there's a debate. JK was on the Racing Post the other day talking about, well, where do we seed it? Do we seed it where it is at the bend, or do we seed it where it is on the run to the bend? Now, I just think it's a no-brainer. It's on the run to the bend, because if a dog starts out in its ideal track to start with, it's not going to start kind of swerving and making other dogs make a decision. It will run its lane. It will take the bend in the line it wants to. If there's no dogs there, obviously 9 times out of 10 there'll be a few dogs around. You're always going to get trouble. I'm not saying you're not going to get trouble, but at least the dog won't be moving away from its natural line, in my opinion, on the run to the corner. So that's where I think you should seed. You should seed in the first, from the boxes halfway to the bend, because dogs will start cutting over even from 6, as the bend approaches, because it's natural.
Yeah.
So, but at least start them off in the right boxes.
Yeah, I guess you will get some people, some trainers will kick off because we both accept there is an imperfect system. No
Mm.
matter what we're doing is the least worst system. I think is all we're looking for, isn't it? You
Yeah,
will get trainers who will go, well, you've cost me that race because if I'd have drawn trap one, um, I could have won that race, but you've insisted that I run out of three, and I
mm.
know my dog wants trap one, and the race manager will go, yeah, well, I know you prefer trap one, but it isn't necessarily because you have an absolute trap one runner. It's just you think you'll get a better run given the lay of the race.
Mm.
So yeah, this
Not ideal, but a start.